Hi, welcome to BIPOC Manager Podcast. This is Khalil Gullivala. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about allyship and aid with Cynthia Keza Birikundavyi. She's a Canadian Burundian humanitarian assistance specialist, writer, and diversity inclusion advocate. With over 10 years of experience in governmental and non-governmental organization, Cynthia's work is spanned across four continents in various fields such as camp management, mine action, and emergency medical response with organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières, the UN Mine Action Service, Oxfam, UNHCR, and the UN Refugee Agency. She currently works as an independent consultant for nonprofit organizations. But beyond that, she's also the founder and president of Theatre for a Cause Geneva, a Swiss-based association that raises awareness and funds for local charities to the performing arts. She co-authored and curated and published two original plays, Journal de Confinement and What I Know About You 2020, currently available on Amazon worldwide. Cynthia, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cynthia, one of the questions I love to talk about to you about is really about allyship, right?
Yeah.
So, we talk about allyship, we talk about aid, what does allyship look like, not only maybe at the interpersonal level, but also at the organization structural level?
Yeah. Allyship, if we look at the very definition of it, is understood as something along the line of active support for the rights of a minority of a marginalized group without being a member of it. Um, and the understanding in practical terms of allyship is often reduced to, unfortunately, actions that are ad hoc. So for example, you go to a shop, you see somebody who's been who's prevented from receiving good service due to an identity marker. It could be age, race, gender, and you intervene to interrupt that. And that is seen as allyship, which it's part of it. But if we only focus on those actions, then we forget to look at the drivers that led to that exclusionary action. And it is similar to, if I can go into imagery, it is similar to trying to stop an overflowing sink by bringing extra buckets without taking the time and space
Hmm.
to look at what created the water leak, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at allyship and when we want to understand and embrace allyship, we need to look at the drivers behind exclusionary practices. It's looking at power structures that shape our interactions, both on micro, at personal and macro levels. And in organizations, allyship requires a conscious effort to recognize and dismantle those power dynamics to allow marginalized voices to lead and be heard without gatekeeping.
Hmm.
So, at the interpersonal level, I would say that it involves recognizing our own privilege, and asking ourselves and recognizes the places where we actually feel comfortable, where we never question whether we can be ourselves, whether we can share parts of our identity, where we feel like we feel normal, quote
Hmm.
unquote, and asking ourselves whether this space is actually accessible for others and whether the others who are sharing that space with us feel the same, and working to elevate those voices to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. And structurally, well, it means embedding these principles within our policies and practices and challenging the existing structure to ensure that all voices are not only included but have real influence in decision making processes. But it starts with acknowledging at structural level that our places of work and places of work, even in the aid sector, are influenced by and permeable to the same type of inequities and injustices that we see in society. In the aid sector, the same types of injustices, inequities that we're fighting against. It needs to put us as complicit and part of the problem, regardless of what our charter or mission value statement says. And it can be a very uncomfortable place to start from. But in order for true allyship to exist, we need to commit to that uncomfortable positioning and address those need for change by discussing, equitable resource distributions, inclusive leadership, who gets to say where, what is the norm, what is the standard, and who are we doing it for?
Yeah. To your point, Cynthia, you talk about stuff, allyship and power structure, right? It's the interpersonal level, the organizational level. And you mentioned humanitarian aid, which is a sector that you work so much in. And I
Yeah.
can't, and I kind of feel like in some sense that must be such a tricky thing to handle because that's almost putting the magnifying glass on power dynamics, history, economic questions, people questions. What has that experience been like?
I have to say it really depends on the environment because we also have to take into account that we are at different stages individually, but also as society in our quest for, you know, that inclusion or the desire levels for that to look at that space is also varies. It is difficult because you arrive in this sector with very good intention and you want to contribute to a collective betterment, right? Um, so you work hard, you sacrifice a lot, you're away for your family, and then maybe sometimes you step back a few years later and you realize that you may have contributed to, yes, on the surface, bringing those extra buckets of to help with the overflowing of the water, but maybe you haven't helped working on the underlying issues. It could be hard to accept. It could be really exhausting as well because those underlying issues are deeply rooted and there's no easy solution. So it can be uncomfortable. I've seen more and more efforts to look at the underlying causes of inequities in the aid sector. There is more and more organizations that are questioning, the title international staff versus local staff. They're questioning who we're writing reports for, and when we advertise results and when we discuss about things that we did well or not well, who do we talk to? Do we talk to and who is our audience? And often when we look at these, we see that it's usually geared towards people with the money and not the people that we're there to work with and for. All of these inequities create a power relationship in terms of decision making that centers people who are supposed to be there and collaborate rather than the people that are requiring that collaboration and support. And those are, there's no one offenser, but when we talk about allyship in the aid sector, we need to look at those questions to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is sustainable and in a way that aligns with the values that we're trying to uphold, which can be complicated in an environment and in structures that were not necessarily built for the geopolitical landscape that we see today.
Yeah. Cynthia, thank you so much for that response. I mean, it's something I used to work in the nonprofit sector as well.
Yeah.
And I saw some of those things as well, the inequities, the fact that sometimes, the reports are meant for an audience that's very different than the people that are being helped. And just seeing that, you could be in a room with people who are absolutely with a lot of money and power behind them, but also people disenfranchised. And I think seeing
Yeah.
that gap for me was something that was very, it was something that I think I struggle with and some people struggle in the sector. But the work is always important, right? I mean, it's the fact of helping people. And
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, the work is important, and that's why I do believe that collaboration, international cooperation is necessary. I sometimes I doubt and questions the dynamics that are upholded with this transactional relationship that we have right now, where while we are putting emphasis on local communities more and more, we are still the one, and I'm saying we as an international coming in somebody else's environment, we're still the one with the power of giving that voice, of giving that platform, of giving that emphasis. And that should be the other way around. I should be adapting to an environment in order for me to contribute, in order to leverage my knowledge and see how I can be of service. And that is something that is not quite there yet. I mean, I would say, to be blunt, that is not there yet.
Okay. Um, it's something maybe on that track, you're changing tracks a little bit, Cynthia. You talk about sort of, giving a voice to people, giving
Mhm.
them the power and local. And I gotta think about your work with theater company and writing plays. Can you tell me how like,
Yeah.
how did that come up?
Well, I always loved theater. I always loved the art. And I do think that communities are, I mean, that allyship or understanding among one another is done through community care. And community care is the understanding that, the success and well-being of one individual contribute to the collective success of all. In order to create that community care where we can uplift each other, when we can call out and call in one another, we need to better understand each other. And that's done through proximity, through the sharing of common experiences and understanding of one another, despite, what is seemingly very different um, bubbles or realities. And I think it was, well, I mean, I don't think it was during 2020, the first time that I thought about writing for a play, using art as a way to convey those messages. During this year of well, yeah, this year of social distancing, where so many people had stories and so many people felt isolated, where we're all going through similar experiences in different ways. And through that, we started asking for stories and wrote stories ourselves of people's reality during a year of social distancing, creating series of monologues that allow for people to share their stories in an uninterrupted fashion. And through that experiences and through the, putting that play together, publishing the book, we realized that they had a very healing effect, but also a soothing effect for us individuals, but also as a community, to not only be able to express oneself, but having other people express words that we may not have been able to verbalize ourselves.
Mm.
And so we took that concept and did it again on other topics such as love and power, to continue to build those linkages between communities, to create a place where we can all share stories that are very different, and at the end realize that we're all interconnected, because that's the reality. That's we are all interconnected, and our success and our well-being is dependent on others' success and well-being as well.
Amazing. I can just see, again, that sense of art and theater, like again, topics you brought up again, the sense of being focused on the local, focused on people, giving them the power, giving them a voice, and giving them a sense of who they are.
Yeah, yeah. And if we go back to organizational culture, for example, I do believe that not only this is a tool to create community care, but we also, if I go back to the different narratives that usually doesn't create the space to foster community care, it's often a scarcity mindset. If we don't see the connection between each other, we often see each other creating more space for the others as competition, as a zero-sum game. If I change the way I'm doing, or if I create more space for others, then it means that it reduces my space for advancement, for professional growth, for success, for acknowledgement. And it's really difficult to create change in an environment. And in contrast, when we look at a culture of abundance, a culture of community, a culture of collective success, that's where we can create true allyship, because success doesn't come at the expense of another, but rather enhances the collective.
Amazing, Cynthia. And so, before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to mention, anything you'd like to highlight?
Uh, I do really believe that we can use storytelling, for example, to focus on community care, and to change the different narratives of scarcity that we see. I I've been I'm grateful enough to have the opportunity to do it through theater, and I'm slowly shifting to trying to do it in my consulting work as well, creating a space for people to reflect, to share their stories in a safe manner, and creating that connection with one another, and finding different ways to address topics or starting points that can be uncomfortable. So I invite people, leaders, to think of that, to lean into that vulnerability, to lean into the long-term goal and the 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 space where complexity and results are able to intermingle
Mm,
while all not having all the answers at the same time. I invite leaders to not think in silos, but think intersectionally. Because again, I think that if we look at diversity in in silos, so if we look at gender or race or religion in itself without looking at them together, we also buy into that scarcity mindset,
mm,
where we feel that, you know, especially if you're part of a marginalized group, that you need to fight for your cause because there's not enough resources to talk about everything. But we are not just gender, we are not just disability, we are not just race or religion. So I invite leaders and communities to lean into that discomfort, initial discomfort, because it's not always uncomfortable, and use that use that discomfort to start reaching out to other people, to create that closeness that creates the foundation for trust and cooperation.
nice. It's there. Thank you. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, contact you, what's the best way they could do that?
Well, it's very easy through LinkedIn. Very, very present on the social media. So Cynthia Birikundavyi, I believe that my name will be written in there. And I'm I love to discuss different topics around diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in the aid sector, looking at art and storytelling as well to bring teams together. And obviously anybody can check out our theater production association, Theater for a Cause Geneva, where we have examples of what people can create when they're giving a chance in the space to be themselves without the fear of retribution or not being understood and accepted. And I do think that that can be a great way to start great conversations and build long lasting trust and community.
Yeah, community. Thank you so much for being a guest here, Cynthia.
Of course, thank you for having me.